Hi everyone, welcome. This is Diana Sinton, the Executive Director of UCGIS. We are at the top of the hour right now, 2 o'clock East Coast, and we're going to be formally starting this broadcast in just another moment. People are continuing to log on right now. We had it set in practice mode for a minute longer than I had intended, but I see all of the attendees coming in as we speak. I'm going to go ahead and begin my show here. As a reminder, during this webinar, attendee microphones will remain muted. We will have an opportunity during the second half after the formal presentations for people to be able to ask questions. You'll be able to unmute then. If we have any audio issues, we'll be able to type into the question space, and I will be keeping track of the questions and we'll be able to direct them to different attendees then. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and everyone will be able to receive the link for the recording later today. Feel free to share the recording with anyone within your organization or your community. We are eager to be able to share these messages far and wide. So welcome everyone. Again, my name is Diana Sinton. I'm the Executive Director of UCGIS. I am very pleased today to be able to offer this hosted session by UCGIS. We're going to be diving in right now to this topic, using professional credentialing exams within academic contexts. We've got 4 very interested and interesting speakers to share their thoughts on this. And with no further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to Karen Shakman, who's the Managing Director of ASPRS. Karen, here comes your opportunity. And Karen, as a reminder, you can unmute yourself too.
Okay, you see my screen and you can hear me.
All set.
Okay, great. Okay, hi, I'm Karen Shakman, and as the first speaker today, I'm going to be talking about ASPRS certification program, but I also hold a number of different professional credentials myself. And for 12 years, I've been teaching at Penn State University in the online geospatial education program. So I believe I have a fairly well-rounded perspective on this topic, which will hopefully add value to today's discussion. I thought it would be useful to begin the session today by clarifying definitions of various credentials that apply in the geospatial profession. I find there's frequently some confusion about the difference between a professional license, a certificate, a professional certification, and accreditation. And we need to be very careful about the way we use this terminology among ourselves, and particularly when we're talking to students and new people entering the profession. So a license is a type of credential that's required to perform a particular function. So an example would be a driver's license. One must have a driver's license to operate a vehicle, and that license is issued by a state government agency. The criteria to obtain the license is that you're minimally competent at driving, and it doesn't attest to any special expertise you may have as a driver. So for example, like I can legally drive a pickup truck, but my driver's license says nothing about my ability to safely pull a trailer with that truck. So, and finally, I can be given a ticket for driving without a license. So it's legally enforceable. So the FAA Part 107 certification for operating a drone would be an example of a license required in the geospatial profession. And states also define the practice of surveying and engineering and require licensure for that practice. And the geospatial activities that require licensing in a particular state are defined by that state's legislation. A certificate, such as the Remote Sensing and Earth Observation Certificate that I teach at Penn State, attests to the completion of a curriculum and mastery of certain knowledge and skills, usually in an academic setting. So this is something that's certainly valuable to have it on your resume, but there's no legal requirement to have it to perform in the profession. Professional certification, such as that is offered by ASPRS, GISCI, and USGIF, all of whom are going to be speaking today, is also not a legal requirement for performance or practice in the profession, but is issued by a professional organization, not a government agency, and it recognizes achievement beyond the level of minimum competence. So it's normal to have to show a history of education and professional experience and possibly take an exam, which is something we're going to talk about more today. So certification is recognition by one's peers that one has special expertise. So taking a little bit of liberty with my previous example, I might be able to go to my local 4-H club and get them somehow to validate my ability to pull a horse trailer safely with my pickup truck. And while that's not something that I legally need to to pull a horse trailer, I might be able to show that to a friend or a teammate and say, hey, I've been checked out and I've been shown to be, I know what I'm doing when I'm pulling the trailer. Okay, fine. And then finally, accreditation. Accreditation is generally given to a program, not an individual. So, for example, USGIF accredits academic institutions who have certificates in geospatial intelligence. And ABET accredits institutions who offer engineering programs. They basically look at the curriculum and say, yes, this curriculum, we feel that this curriculum is valid and sufficient to meet the requirements for education for someone to go on in the profession. CESB, and I'll explain who they are in a minute, accredits professional organizations who offer certification programs. Okay, so we have all of those words, all of these terms are interacting together, but they all have specific meanings. And, you know, again, it's just important to pay attention to how we use these terms when we're having the subsequent discussion. Okay, so how about accreditation? I'm just going to talk about that for 1 second. CESB stands for the Council of Engineering and Scientific Specialty Boards. There are 17 member organizations. CESB themselves belong as a participating organization in the NCEES, the National Council for Examiners in Engineering and Surveying, who consult with states on their licensure requirements and licensing laws. They maintain accreditation guidelines. In other words, they say this is what your certification program should meet, these minimum requirements to be accredited. And they provide an independent review of the certification program to ensure that these programs are operated fairly and that their requirements are clearly communicated to applicants, and basically saying that you're operating your certification program in adherence to these general guidelines. They don't tell you what you have to actually certify. They don't define what your criteria need to be, but they just say that if you've defined your criteria and that's what you've put out there for the public to see, then you need to operate that program consistently with what you're telling people you do. Okay, so you need to, in order to be accredited, you need to state the purpose of your program, define the structure of the certifying body, what resources you're putting toward that, how you define how you operate your program, disclose that to applicants, and so on. Okay, so that concludes the overview of the credentialing landscape. And from here on, I'm just going to talk about ASPRS certification particularly. So we offer certification in multiple geospatial disciplines. And again, this is to attest to one's specialized experience and understanding in that discipline. It does not replace licensure, and that we are accredited by CESB. We offer certification in 5 disciplines: photogrammetry, remote sensing, GIS, LiDAR, and UAS. And we have 3 certification levels in each of those disciplines. So at the highest level, the professional or the certified mapping scientist. We also have a technologist level, which requires a little bit less experience and does not require as much, you don't have to show experience in doing, for example, the professional project management or as much responsible charge. Technologist is basically attesting to your ability to do the work, not manage others or deal with contract negotiations and that type of thing. And then the intern level, which I think is of interest particularly to this conversation, which is for people who are coming out of a university level program, who've taken geospatial courses and particularly might want to be able to take the certification exam early before they've achieved all the years of experience that they need to get to one of the other certification levels. So that's where I think ASPRS has the most to offer to the discussion for today. I have a couple slides here that just define what the professional level is as opposed to the technologist, the technician level. I don't think we really need to spend a lot of time on that right now. We do give credit for formal education in terms of evaluating someone's experience. We don't have a specific education requirement. You don't have to have any particular type of degree to become certified by ASPRS, but if you do have a degree, that can count as an equivalent for some of the professional experience. The application process is that you submit the application form with the fee. We require references. It's reviewed by a committee, and if it's determined that you have the appropriate amount of experience and you have the references that back that up, then they say, okay, you've passed the review, you can sit for the exam. The exams are administered on an individual basis with proctors, and we don't require them to be, it's not held at a specific location at a specific time. We let the applicant arrange with the proctor to take the exam. Okay, for the intern, which is the student, they submit an application form with the fee, with the transcript, and one advisor recommendation in lieu of the other professional references. And again, if they pass the committee review, they can be allowed to sit for the exam without having all of the additional requisite experience. The exam itself at the highest, the mapping scientist photogrammetrist level, is 100 multiple choice questions. And depending on which specialty area you're applying for, you get a higher, there's a body of common questions of general knowledge that are the same across the board, but you would get a greater number of questions in the particular domain, photogrammetry, LiDAR, etc. And you have 4 hours to do the 100 multiple choice question exam. And this is a matrix this is on our website too, so you can refer back to this, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but just to show you again that there are, math, science, engineering, and surveying principles, some physics, and so on, and that the photogrammetry, GIS, LiDAR questions, there are questions in all of the disciplines on all of the exams, but the ratio of the number of questions is what varies from specialty to specialty. But even if you're getting a LiDAR certification, you're expected to know something about photogrammetry and GIS, for example. On the technologist level, it's a 50-question exam given in 2 hours, but the other principles apply. And here's an example of the matrix. And you can see there's a bit more focus on the basic common knowledge, again, with some increased number of questions in the domain area. We report our results as pass-fail. We don't give them a raw score. And if a person does fail the exam, they are given some feedback in terms of which area of questions were the most difficult for them. So they don't get to obviously see the grading of the individual questions, but they would be given some indication that you had trouble with the questions related to photogrammetry or the questions related to basic surveying practice or measurement science. And I think that concludes my presentation. So I'm sure we'll have more interesting discussion coming up.
Thank you very much, Karen. For that, I am now going to change presenter to our next panelist, Camellia Cantor from USGIF.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Karen, for giving such a good overview of the credentials in particular. At USGIF, we're also faced with many situations where we need to explain the differences between collegiate certificates and professional certifications. So it's really important to have that clarified in advance. Well, for those who are not familiar with USGIF, we're a nonprofit educational foundation. We were founded to promote the geospatial intelligence tradecraft, and we organize a number of activities in support of that, such as conferences. We award scholarships. We also offer collegiate program accreditation in academia. We offer professional certifications, training, curriculum development, and we also have a number of publications. Also, geospatial intelligence is sort of an emerging field. We consider it to be a meta-discipline because it uses every sub-discipline of geography, but also overlaps with many other traditional disciplines. It also uses domain knowledge and provides insights about the human impact. And it provides also competitive advantage through the application of the art and the tradecraft of the intelligence discipline. The field of geospatial intelligence has been defined on the government side, is defined by Title 10 and consists of imagery, intelligence, and geospatial information. But we're looking at it today from a much broader perspective. So we're trying at USGIF to grow geospatial intelligence and really define it as a profession. But the development of new certifications begin with creating an essential body of knowledge for that profession. So USGIF has developed what is called the essential body of knowledge, which is a document detailing the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities deemed critical by the geoing community as being necessary to the geoing workforce. The EBK details the competencies needed at varying levels of experience. We also offer a higher education accreditation of certificate programs, and lately, since this year, we're also updated our standards and policies, and we have been adding the accreditation of degrees. Our professional certifications have been launched in 2016. And as I said, all of these are being built on the essential body of knowledge that is a living document, updated as much as possible. We're about to publish the new version of the EBK this month. The EBK it's really going from prerequisites up to the mastery level. So we've divided it from prerequisites to foundational, applications, and mastery. And our subject matter experts have been identifying learning outcomes for each individual category. I have here some EBK examples. If you look into the foundation and application, there are a few examples of how we have the different categories and the learning outcomes that come with those. This is coming from one of the competencies. USGIF, as I said, also awards colleges and universities with the ability to confer accredited certificates and lately degrees in geospatial intelligence. Each program that we accredit matches knowledge and skills that have been presented by USGIF in the essential body of knowledge. And we have currently 16 programs that have received USGIF accreditation and several others on the pipeline. Moving up to the certifications, the professional certifications, these are the three professional certifications that we offer: the CGP in GIS and analysis, remote sensing and imagery analysis, and geospatial database management. And what's really important to mention here, because all of these three certifications have been accredited by NCCA, the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, which is the accrediting body of the Institute for Credentialing Excellence, the ICE. We are sort of mandated to separate the education, the collegiate education, from the certifications, which is very interesting because we're also trying to build a pipeline into a career pathway into geospatial intelligence. So really going back to the title of the webinar today, using professional credential exams within academic GIS context, if we look into NCCA accreditation, we shouldn't be doing that. But if we look into the future and trends in professionalizing the workforce, there's need for a different level of thinking in creating the pipeline into professional certifications. We start from K through 12, where we try to embed some of our EBK competencies into curriculum development for high schools and even for lower levels. We also develop curriculum for two-year community colleges, currently working with the Geotech Center on an NSF grant on creating curriculum for those. And of course, we accredit and we support the four-year institutions in developing their curriculum by utilizing the essential body of knowledge for the geospatial intelligence. And as we speak, we're developing a new exam, the Joint Essentials exam, which is supposed to serve as a liaison, a bridge between the collegiate education, the collegiate certificates, and the professional certifications. This particular exam, it's supposed to be considered, is going to be presented as an entrance exam for the professional certifications, but it's going to be also a summative exam for those in academia. And it is aligned with the essential body of knowledge as well. And because it's going to be another professional certification, even though geared towards those coming out of academia, is going to require certification and PDU eligibility, and of course alignment with the essential body of knowledge. Therefore, this new exam is going to target recent or soon to graduate students from USGIF accredited programs, but is also going to be available for those outside of the USGIF accredited programs as an essentials exam in geospatial intelligence, and offered in particular to those, ideally to those who have working knowledge up to 5 years of working experience, but no more than that. More than 5 years experience would be would be eligible for the professional certifications, the high-level professional certifications that we offer. All of these, again, align with the updated geospatial intelligence body of knowledge, essential body of knowledge, And all the development work that we do leverage our academic programs, build on subject matter expertise and psychometric analysis, and ensures reliability and validity. We're planning to pilot test the finalized exam in the spring of 2019, and we're currently working on developing it. There are, of course, several known challenges, such as the alignment between academic curriculum and essential body of knowledge, because we don't want to impose our academic partners the way to build their curriculum. They also have the possibility to adjust and only take from the essential body of knowledge elements that are specific and pertain to their desired needs and what they want to teach their students. We also see challenges in demonstrating value of credentials to higher education stakeholders. And we're working hard with the government side and also with the industry side to demonstrate that particular value. And the increasing demand signal for credentials and making sure that we maintain the quality and the level expected from us. Some of the mitigation strategies, we're trying to have a phase-in alignment requirement and offer institution support when moving their curriculum, changing, updating their curriculum. We also try to articulate the potential that credentials have as labor market currency and evidence of learning. And we're collaborating with employers to determine how to best integrate credentials in human capital practices. And last, we're trying to formalize our policies and procedures for ensuring integration of standards, accreditation, and certification. We'll also make sure that we ensure consistent, transparent communication with all the stakeholders, from the educators up to students, to professional credential holders and employers and the general public. We want to demonstrate also return on investment for geospatial intelligence credentials. This is the most challenging as of now. And we're very open to new approaches and innovation, and we're strong supporters of micro-credentials that might be creating building blocks from the collegiate accreditation of certificates up to the professional level. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Camellia. I'm now going to pass the baton to our third presenter, who is Bill Hodge from GISCI.
I am unmuted. Am I heard? And can everyone see my screen?
Yes, loud and clear. Well
Diana,
done.
thank you. It is a pleasure to be with each of you today, and it's a special pleasure to be a part of the presenters, all of whom are an esteemed group of individuals. I have found, as executive director of GISCI and many years before that, which this is my third career at least, the key to a successful career is essentially to surround yourself with the best and the brightest of individuals and simply get out of the way. People will associate an assumption of excellence with the people with whom you associate. The same thing is true for organizations. GISCI was formed from the development of the GIS P as a pilot body by URISA in 2003. URISA formed this over a period of several years. It led to the culmination of the certified professional category in the GIS profession overall, but they determined that it needed to be administered by an institution. And GISCI is a nonprofit of the C6 category, set up specifically to administer the GISP since it was formally introduced in 2004. We have developed the GISCI Core Technical Knowledge Exam and added it to the process in 2015. And the discussion we have today will be the development of the GISP since that period of time as a software agnostic certification as are the others that you have listened to today. And I would make a quick point that these are not all of the technical certifications available to the geospatial industry at the moment, but these do represent those of a software agnostic capacity. We are not testing over what platform an individual would use. We seek to make sure that they understand the foundation and the whys of what they are doing, not the specific software. The key to our success has been the member organizations, the associations that make up our governing board and body since we started in existence. And over that period of time, URISA, GITA, NSGIC, the AAG, and UCGIS, the body offering and sponsoring this webinar today, have been those that have brought us to the level of success. Part of that organizational success with whom we have surrounded and associated ourselves with have been USGIF, with which we have a specific memorandum of agreement, and the Geotech Center, the NSF Center of Excellence for Geospatial Curriculum and Education Support from the community college to the university level. Since we started, and the program began with a voluntary portfolio that did not include an exam, it has grown to the level of over 8,000 GISPs that have been certified, an approximate number approaching that level still active, with an international and world recognized capacity in terms of this operation. Since we added the exam in 2015, we have over 250 individuals coming to the site every day, registering to begin to look at the process, and this gives us a foundation of over 13,000 potential individuals, and that pipeline is increased on a month-to-month basis. What has happened initially, this was recognized by the geospatial industry as a workforce-centered professional certification that had some value in attempting to demonstrate at least a minimal and beyond competency at the GIS level. When we started putting the exam together, the portfolio was based upon a combination of an ethics statement to which anyone coming to become a GISP would agree. To become a GISP, we require at least 4 years full-time geospatial experience, because we're convinced it takes that long to move from an entry-level position to a platform to where you can begin to call yourself a professional with a mastery of several categories. The portfolio application, separate from the exam, is based on a rubric with a minimum point requirement set up for education, experience, and contributions. There are minimum points required in each category and overall, and the portfolio can be completed entirely separately from the exam. To start the process, there is no requirement necessary, although the requirements for finishing it are that you essentially meet those requirements I just mentioned before you are awarded a GISP. The exam, added in 2015, is open for anyone not currently a GISP. It can be taken at any time in a person's career, and it will give them a tremendous indication of just how much they know of the knowledge, skills, and abilities, those KSAs that we have chosen to concentrate on. We have a recertification period. Every 3 years, an individual is certified, and that 3-year period matches the initial certification period at the moment. And the recertification does not include the exam. That is a one-time part of the program, but education and contributions are required, and the experience that a person has gathered can be used as an option. If one were to start from the very beginning and do everything at once, and do it on an on a national testing basis, the GISP would cost $400. There is an additional $50 fee for testing internationally. And starting in the second year of your anniversary as a GISP, you begin to pay an annual maintenance fee that will continue for the duration of the period. Your recertification is paid at the time of your recertification on that 3-year basis. The exam component is that I believe most interested or most of interest to the parties on the call today. We based ours on a job analysis with at least a 4-year experience level. The exam has been informed by the GIS&T body of knowledge that's been around since the mid-2000s that UCGIS pioneered, sponsored, and is currently updating. It is informed by the GTCM that the Geotech Center has authored and updates, and it was developed by GISP specifically for the GISP, and we have followed a strict protocol from the psychometric community, overseen by a number of consultants, in terms of how we develop the exam, how we run it, how the exam questions are authored, administered, and vetted throughout the process. A quick analysis: if you look at the body of knowledge as it existed in the mid-2000s, there were over 400 topics that were included in the full suite of the GIS community. After we went through the job analysis, the DACMs, the GIS P Focus Groups, we centered on 44 what we've called KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we test across in 6 knowledge categories with the weight percentage that you see in front. The exam is a 4-hour proctored exam administered at a testing facility. PSI Online is ours, contracted on a worldwide basis. We offer the exam twice a year, early June and early December, and it is a 4-hour timed exam in which an individual will take between 170 and 195 questions. 100 of those will be scored. The remainder are pre-test items that are being evaluated for subsequent use as scored items downstream. The next few slides are our exam blueprint, which is essentially the exam description. Each knowledge category is divided into a number of KSA descriptions. These that you see on the slides are a consolidated summary. There's a much more detailed description of each of the KSAs in our exam blueprint off of the website. The advantages of an exam for us have been that it provides, for the first time, a measurable competency level. The portfolio prior to this was successful, but it left a little more room with some subjectivity, and the industry has seized upon the exam as that measurable component, and it is highly valued as one of those preferred or credentials that are considered a plus in a resume, and credentialing as a whole is finding an increased acceptance in the workforce across all of the platforms, organizations, and industries in which GIS is employed. This provides a certification open to the students, as all of these are to one extent or another, provides for increased student participation. It provides a credentialing entry for students early in a career, and we are convinced that the earlier a student recognizes the possibility of career enhancement by a certification and an investigation of what the different certifications are and what that value might be for them, the better they are, or the better able they are to make decisions in terms of what career pathway they might want to pursue. The first and the only real advice that I would advise to a university body or students considering an evaluation: help your students recognize that what they're doing in the academic community is only the beginning of the rest of their professional career. It's a pleasure visiting with you today. Thank you for the time, and Diana, I turn that back over to you. I look forward to the further conversations.
Thanks very much, Bill. Our final presenter now is going to be Jeremy Menace, and Jeremy I've asked to speak to us because he has insights as a faculty member in this context. So, Jeremy.
All right, thank you, Diana. Can you hear me?
Send it to you. Yes.
Great. All right, hi everybody. My name is Jeremy Menace. I'm in the Department of Geography and Urban Studies at Temple University. We offer a professional science master's in GIS, as well as undergraduate and graduate certificates in GIS. I've also served on the boards of UCGIS and GISCI and contributed to the UCGIS GIS&T body of knowledge, and also the Department of Labor's GTCM in 2010 or so. But unlike the other folks who have spoken here, I speak only on behalf of myself as one faculty member, not for all faculty members in the GIS world. And thanks to UCGIS for organizing this, and to the other presenters for presenting from their programs. So regarding the use of these credentialing exams in academic contexts, my answer is definitely yes. We all need to recognize there's a core set of skills and competencies that all GIS academic programs should teach. We have exams that test these skills and competencies, so we should definitely use them in an academic context. And it's heartening to hear from all the speakers that the exam is sort of part of a larger picture of professional development. And faculty, we are constantly talking about incorporating professional development into our programs. And incorporating a credentialing exam or some kind of process towards a credential is definitely an important part of that professionalization process. And I think for some faculty, maybe including myself, when you're working on a PhD and you're doing research, you're not as focused on these kinds of things that we can do to incorporate in our curriculum that helps our students in this process of professionalization. And I think that these organizations and the exam can help us with that particular process. But that gets to the question of how to actually incorporate these exams or these credentialing process into academic programs. One thing that comes to mind for me is that these exams tend to focus on specific kind of hard knowledge, skills, competencies, for instance, someone's knowledge of coordinate systems or something like that. But that's only one part of our academic programs, and I would think most academic programs that focus on GIS, where we also focus on things like critical thinking, project management, working in teams, written and oral communication, and so on. So in that sense, I think incorporating these exams into the academic programs could be an important part of a culminating experience potentially in a program, but certainly not the only one, because the education hopefully is going to be more comprehensive than something that can be covered in an exam of 100 questions or something like that. But I do think it's important, to incorporate these kinds of things because we want our students to work towards a credential, to be aware of these professional organizations, and they want to also, and they want to put something on the resume. I just want to list some challenges that I, thought of in considering this issue. One is that a lot of GIS programs, academic programs, differ from one another pretty substantially. There's programs in research universities versus community colleges. There are programs that come from departments that are based in the liberal arts, like ours. There's others that might come from engineering or, other colleges and schools within a university. There's programs that focus on different kinds of domains, whether they're more social science oriented or physical science oriented, or come from a landscape architecture background or whatever. And this idea of accreditation and incorporating the exam, I think a lot of faculty don't like the idea of teaching to an exam, that they're going to have to change or gear their education towards a particular set of questions. And I think that is a concern. I'll say again, my personal view that there is definitely a core set of skills and competencies in GIS that we all need to teach in a GIS program, and that's a key concept. But I wouldn't want, this approach to necessarily remove the creativity, innovation, and diversity that comes from the different kinds of GIS academic programs that are available. And so there is a tension there that we need to be aware of, that we can still encourage these different kinds of programs, even while incorporating this sort of centralization of knowledge. And I think one of the challenges there has to do with the fact that things are changing so much so quickly in terms of the technology and the types of jobs and positions that people with backgrounds in GIS are getting. We're keenly aware of that in our development of our academic programs, that the kinds of jobs that our students might get are outside the bounds of the areas that people with GIS backgrounds have traditionally worked in, whether it's local and regional or federal government positions, or environmental consulting firms, or in geospatial intelligence, or and so on. Many of them are interested in working in the business sector, or supply chain management, or spatial data science and analytics in the business community, public health, and these sorts of things. So wouldn't want the expansion of the potential placement of our students to be sort of limited by what people have seen as the traditional GIS knowledge areas in the past, and that is definitely a challenge. And it goes towards where the boundaries are in terms of defining our particular field. The other challenge is, and this has changed a lot, and I'm really encouraged by this, but I think a lot of faculty just don't know enough about our professional organizations. They don't know enough about credentialing. Many of them are not, they don't have credentials, in professional GIS, because they may have a PhD or something like that, and that's satisfactory for what they're doing. So I think we still have a lot of work to do to build bridges between the academic community and these professional organizations, and professional pathways to professionalization for our students. But I think we're all moving in the right direction. I'm really encouraged by what everyone said today. So thanks very much.
Thank you for those comments, Jeremy. I think you raised some important points about the connections, the types of degrees that most faculty have, and their general amount of awareness of the different opportunities out there for students. If anyone, while we get to some of the questions that have been put into the question space, if anyone wants to type out a question into the question space, we will direct it to the panelists. If you'd like to have me unmute your microphone and ask a question out loud, you can raise your hand and I can do that. But while we're waiting for some questions to come in, there's one question asked earlier in the session by Joseph Kursky about the ASPRS exams. Are those offered at Pearson testing centers or some other places? Karen.
We generally arrange on an individual basis to have a proctor who's identified by our certification committee. So no, you don't have to go to a testing center, and it doesn't have to be on the date can be arranged between the proctor and the individual.
Okay. And which kind of brings up the whole issue about the logistics of this. And Jeremy touched on this a little bit, but as an overview statement, the way I understand it is that any of these exams that are currently, that have been developed or are in the process of being developed, could be taken by students, and a number of these, like the essentials one that's being developed, is designed for students or people just coming out of university, for example. There's nothing to prevent students from taking it. Part of the area of interest is, what does it mean for a faculty member to integrate it in a little more formal way into their course? The faculty that I've spoken with, and as I understand it, no one at this point is saying you must pass, take and then get a passing score on test X, and that's going to count as your final exam for this semester. That might be some of the software specific ones I know are being integrated a little more formally, but not these other types of professional or organizational exams. So the logistics that I think people need to think through include the timing of things. It sounds like the ASPRS ones can be organized a little more, organically and dynamically versus the GIS CI ones, which are, you have to sign up well in advance, and you've got just the two different times of the year when these are going to be done. These are optional opportunities for students. They're not, as I said, I'm not aware of any situation where it's an academic program has decided that it's mandatory. Karen, I see your microphone on. Feel free, any of the panelists, feel free to jump in and add or correct to anything that I'm saying right here. And so this is kind of the space where we're going right now. If university faculty do become a little more aware of the existence of these and the fact that lots of good thought have gone into developing them, how could they be integrated? We've got a question here that's come in from Ola Alkvist at Ohio State, and I'll read the question out loud. Could either of the first three speak to how they think academic programs should try to align to all of the available standards that seem somewhat similar but slightly different? What are the options? You know, are there, let's see, I guess the exams are on part different because they're for different audiences and accredited with multiple bodies. Ola's asking about expecting to see a merging into one course standard. So there are a couple different questions there, Ola, that could be unpacked. But any of the panelists want to talk about that, about connections there between the exams or the different standards that contribute to these?
Sure, this is Karen. I think the GTCM, and Geospatial Technology Competency Model is, I didn't mention this, but ASPRS certainly references that in terms of developing the matrices that we use for our exam process. I think, you know, each of us, we have, you know, some specific area of focus, you know, particularly USGIF, and Camellia can speak to this, but I mean, they have specific requirements in the geospatial intelligence community that aren't necessarily addressed in the GTCM. The GTCM is a bit more broad. Likewise, ASPRS, a lot of the technologies that we are specifically certifying are newer and weren't really addressed in great depth in the GTCM. So it would, you know, we did in the second rerun or second revision of it, we did get some, you know, remote sensing and mapping, more remote sensing included, but I don't think it covers the competencies in those areas to the extent that we would need it for our certification program. But it doesn't mean we couldn't continue to work with them to get it into that form.
Anyone else have any comments on Ola's question? It's related in a way to, Andrew, I'll get to your question there in a moment, but I want to shift over to the question that Lorene Becker just posed about the organizations with the different KSAs when they're compatible and not compatible. You know, there is no one single foundational document, as much as I would like to think that the GIS and TBOK, which is one of the earliest documents that pulled together things, could be. There's no intent for that to be not complementary to other things, and there is significant overlap, and I think that they do draw on each other, but I think that there are still different audiences that these documents are designed for with different intents, and that's going to contribute to the differences that persist. One of the things, I have had a chance to look at the essential body of knowledge closely, and one of the great things about this revision is there are different levels that they'll have, but those you'll see are just going to be learning outcomes. And one way that the USGIS body of knowledge, the GIS and T body of knowledge, is different now in its current new digital form is that it's not only learning outcomes, as great as learning outcomes are and as much as we need them, but it is some of the core ideas and, you know, some narrative, some content associated with each of ththose learning outcomes. Bill, would you like to jump in?
I would. Thank you. I kept looking for a hand, but I can only raise it virtually. So thank you for recognizing me from afar. I would say I'm going to make some very cautious comments at the moment. GISCI did not produce the exam with the thought that it would be used by academic communities. We did it with the purpose of starting an accreditation process for not only the exam, but the entire certification program itself, that we would be accredited. We have begun to take steps down that pathway, and although the specific accreditation has not been chosen yet, we are strongly leaning toward the ANSI certification in the ISO certification for individuals. The board and GISCI has no intention of certifying bodies, organizations, or academic programs anytime in the foreseeable future, although that could change somewhere down the line. The purpose of our conversation today is simply to make available, and as Jeremy so appropriately pointed out, give an understanding of what the certification is and what the exam covers, so that the bodies considering using this in any capacity can make an intelligent assessment of whether or not it fits as a part of their needs. One of the things that I believe all three of our certification organizations are remiss in, and I'll apologize for my part, GISCI has had short and preliminary conversations with the other two bodies to try to form some coordinated understanding or description of what the three credentialing programs are. They are certainly not equivalent in every capacity. The quality is high in every regard, but they are not for everyone, and they are not for every individual. I do not know if there is one curriculum that could ever be developed that would be appropriate for all three. I'm not even sure that it's appropriate that it be considered in that regard. But my purpose today is simply to participate in what I consider an inevitable part of the evolution of the industry, looking at a total feedback from start to finish of how the academic community, in its importance, turning out individuals who are well trained, looking at the certification that produces a measurable quality or component of individuals moving into those specific industries, and how those industries themselves relate to both. So that answer, I think, is going to be made up by the individual universities and the programs themselves. I will help, but I don't intend to advise, because that's outside of my competence. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Camellia, you had a question or a comment too.
Yes, given that USGIF has been somewhat working on both sides with the academic curriculum and accreditation of certificates, and also building the certification, the professional certification, we've had some challenges because you need to take into consideration academic freedom, and schools should not be imposed what to teach. And I totally agree with what Jeremy said there. It's a challenge to offer solutions at the same time as allow people to pick what's best for them. And we've been using the EBK, the Essential Body of Knowledge, as a framework for the curriculum in academia. But and during the accreditation process, I usually give a matrix containing all the competencies coming from the EBK. And schools go through the process of identifying the competencies that already exist in their courses. So it's sort of a self-evaluation. It's a self-evaluation process during the accreditation, where they look into some of the things that they already have. They identify some of the gaps, and sometimes they realize where they stand within the community. What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and what kind of foci do they have? So it's really, I think it's on the academic side, it's a process of self-evaluation. And all we do is we're really providing an updated framework, and we're ensuring that that framework comes with quality, and it's the voice of the subject matter experts. But basically, again, it's academic freedom, and each school is going to decide what they want to incorporate and what they want to teach their students.
I have
Go ahead,
a
Karen.
comment. I guess, for ASPRS, we're our numbers are a bit smaller. So, and as you mentioned at the beginning, we can arrange things a little bit more organically. I personally try to encourage my students to pursue the intern certifications at ASPRS, because with my knowledge of the content of the exams and knowing what I teach them, I try to convince them that, hey, it's one more exam and it's an additional fee you need to pay, but you're really in a good position right now to do well on this exam. So take it and get it over with, so that in 3 years, when you have the experience to get to apply for the certification, this will be out of the way for you. And so access to the exam, or to the exam process, isn't, at least on the ASPRS side, this really isn't that much of a problem. So for example, if somebody like Jeremy, you had 5 or 6 students in a class that you thought that were all expressed an interest in doing this, and maybe there's safety in numbers if they do it a little bit more as a group, and you could get their applications together and send those to us, we could probably get them pretty quickly through the peer review process and allow the professor to be the proctor for the exam. I mean, for all of us, the exam security is going to be an issue. We have to be sure that the exams are handled in a way that they don't get copied, or the questions don't get distributed. So I think, logistically we can do it. My problem is trying to get the students to really be interested in doing it, because my experience is that they're already so up to their eyeballs in what they have to do for their own, just to complete their academic requirements, that this is just one more thing added on top that they just don't really want to think about. And I want to know how to sell it to them, because I can, they're right there. I have them as a captive audience, but how can I convince them that they really should do this?
Right. That's interesting. I have a couple. We're at the top of the hour, and so I just want to do some wrap-up thoughts here. Jeremy, before I start to do that, do you want to comment right now?
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say, I think it is important to develop some kind of more formal approach to having students enter into this process of joining the professional community. It doesn't necessarily mean that making one of these exams part of their academic program. That's not exactly what I meant, but at least preparing them in some way. I think, Karen, you're absolutely right. Like, doing it on an ad hoc basis is a little bit extra for everyone. So it's going to take a little bit more of a formalization. But I think teaching about the professional world in GIS, in courses that we offer in the academic programs and the credentials that are available, and how one goes about building a GIS career, should be an important part of a GIS curriculum for all academic programs. Thank you.
I totally agree. And in my certificate program, in the introductory course, in one of the early lessons, at least I have an assignment where they have to go out and investigate all 3 of these programs, the USGIF, the GISCI, and ASPRS, and evaluate their, kind of evaluate what the criteria are and evaluate their own interests and positions. Because again, I have a lot of online graduate students, so a lot of them are working in the profession already. And at least I try to do that. I definitely agree that the certification should be at least discussed and talked about, and we need to make the student population aware that this is going to be part of their ongoing professional development once they leave school. And that's really important.
All right, just a couple final comments here as we wrap up. I think all of these are important points that have been raised at the end. Some logistical issues about literally coordinating about, the timing of when a student might take an exam, the cost of taking the exams, and what it would mean to have one organization start to do for, something for a group of students? Are there going to be incentives? What are ways to incentivize students to do it? One thing that we haven't talked about yet, we talked about academic freedom and what it means for faculty to decide, but we also have this idea of academic freedom from or right to privacy from the student side. Andrew Klein from Texas A&M raised the interest in any way of getting any mechanisms to get feedback on where the students are doing well and where they're coming up short. And in all of these situations, we heard that I think most of them provide pass-fail information. Maybe it was the ASPRS one that might have indicated general areas of where the categories or themes where the student might have fallen short, but what does it mean to set up a practice where an instructor would be provided that information? Because as I understand it, probably that would only be going to the individual test taker. So the cycle of how the assessment results actually return to the institution or the individual faculty member is something that's not part of the workflow right now.
And,
so
I would like to add to that, if possible, very briefly.
Sure.
Well, because we're just developing that essential exam, I've asked that question. It's really important to be able to provide that feedback to the faculty teaching, but unfortunately, because we need to deal with the ethical issues and privacy concerns, the only thing that could be provided to the faculty is aggregated data. So we can provide aggregated data on the exam for the class, but not individual, not for the individual.
Right. So that that addresses the question of the idea that this can immediately be substituted in as someone's final exam and have the grade calculated as part of their end of semester assessment and evaluation and grading is still an unresolved matter. Who knows if that ever might be something that the group wants to pursue. Okay, I thank everyone very much for your thoughtful comments and contributions here. Thanks to the audience for the questions and the attention. I hope everyone is able to jump back in now to their regularly scheduled activities at this late point in the semester. I know everyone's super busy. Thanks to all the panelists again. We will be having other UCGIS webinars that are announced for the spring semester soon, so pay attention to our calendar. And as I said earlier, this webinar was recorded and we will provide everyone with the link by sometime tomorrow. So thanks again, everyone, and take care.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.